this is really a sad day. This is really a sad day because what's happened today in court, the UK has basically signed the death warrant of journalism. They've okayed the extradition of Julian Assange to the United States. And again, if you don't know who Julian Assange is, why he's wanted in the US, I'm going to explain everything in a moment. I'll go through the whole case. But again, I'm one of the only journalists covering his extradition case since 2020. And this morning, you had a hearing at Westminster Magistrate Court in London. And what happened, it was more of a formality. They basically rubber stamped the extradition. Okay? And let me go through this with you. I had a huge thread on Twitter, and I explained everything there. When we tuned in, I could see Assange. So I saw Assange this morning. He appeared via video link. This is Blue Room in Belmarsh Prison, and he was basically connected to the court remotely. And he was sitting on this red couch, and he was wearing a gray blazer, and he had this red tie, and he looked a bit better than usual, but not good. And the judge actually spoke to him directly today, right? I'll tell you in a moment why. The judge says it himself, but he has a legal obligation to speak to Assange directly and explain what is happening because this is so serious right now. So, again, just so you can see, here's the thread on Twitter. I went through everything minute by minute as it was happening. This is what I usually do when I'm doing the Assange case. And of course, at first you have Claire Dobbin. She's one of the U.S. prosecution's lawyers. She was speaking to the judge. They just went through a brief summary. Then you had Summers, who's one of Assange's lawyers. He also spoke, and he said something very, very important. So this is Assange's lawyer. He said to the judge, quote, "You have no option but to send the case to the Secretary of State," because that's what it was today, right? It was basically a formality. And we all knew this. We know that we knew that it's just going to be a formality, but still, it doesn't make it any less serious. It doesn't make it any less egregious. And so the judge then turns to Assange and says, "Mr. Assange, can you hear me?" And Assange says, yes, I can. And the judge says that he's required to act today as if Barretzer had decided in favor of extradition. So who is Barretzer? Barretzer is the district judge in the lower court who decided last year not to extradite Assange, right? So she presided over the extradition hearing. You had 3-4 weeks in London where, you have people presenting testimony and arguing why it's bad not to extradite Assange, why it's bad for press freedoms, why it's bad for his mental health, he will commit suicide. And you had a few witnesses for the prosecution saying that, Assange is a spy and blah, blah, blah. And so you had this was across several weeks, and I was there in London, and the judge at that time was Barretzer, and ultimately she decided not to extradite Assange for a weird reason. She said that he would commit suicide if he's extradited, which is true. You have to take his health into consideration. But she agreed with everything else. She agreed with the political charges, basically agreeing that he's a spy, and the conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. Again, I'll go through all this in a second. I'm just running you through what's happening. And so the judge today, this morning, he says, I have to act as if Barretzer did approve the extradition, and now I have to send it to the Secretary of State, because in the United Kingdom, the person that signs an extradition is the Home Secretary. Okay, so the Home Secretary right now is Priti Patel, and it's her duty to sign off on this. And right now, the order is going to go to her desk, and Assange's lawyers have 4 weeks, so until May 18th, to make submissions against the extradition. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about Priti Patel. I have before. I'll just tell you that I am quite confident she will sign the extradition. She's not exactly a friend of journalists, but nevertheless, there's still a little window to change her mind. Hopefully. Now the judge, this is what he says to Assange this morning, right? He says, "I am duty bound to send your case to the Secretary of State." So it's not up to him to change his mind. He can't do anything. He has to send it. It's a formality. And then the judge tells Assange, "I'm obliged to explain to you matters in Section 92 of the Extradition Act." Okay, so I'll show you what Section 92 of the Extradition Act is. Here it is. And they say that this section applies. So again, when we say Extradition Act, we're talking about the law in Britain that permits extraditions to the United States. Because in 2003, the Americans and the British, they signed what is known as the Extradition Treaty, And then you have to translate this treaty into your local laws. And so in the UK, it's known as the Extradition Act. Same thing, right? Although there are some key differences about political extraditions, which I've talked about before. But let me get back to this. Section 92 says that if the appropriate judge, basically that this section applies if the appropriate judge sends a case to the Secretary of State, which is what's happening today. The judge must inform the person, meaning Assange, in ordinary language that he has a right to appeal to the High Court. And if he exercises the right to appeal, it will not be heard until the Secretary of State has made his decision. And that's what the judge did. I saw him today. He looked at Assange and he said, in layman's terms, this means that you have a right to appeal, but you have to wait until Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, has made her decision, right? So it's not. He really had to spell this out clearly because it's basically telling the person their rights. And of course, they say in Section 92, this doesn't apply if the person has consented to their extradition. I don't know any case where this happened, but Assange is certainly not, so forget about this. And then, of course, the judge, he looks at Assange and he says, you have to stay in custody, okay? He said the same exceptions to bail apply, and I remand you in custody pending decision from Patel. Thank you very much. You can go with the officers. That's the last thing he said to Assange. And then that was it. And then Assange, he stayed, because again, he's tuning in remotely. He's not there with his lawyers. So he has to stay on the video to speak to his lawyers. But then, of course, they removed us from the room, the journalists. And that was it. It was literally 5 minutes. Barely 5 minutes. But it's just so significant because what they've done today is again, they've rubber stamped the extradition of a journalist. So again, I'm going to go through the case now because I've been covering this for 2 years. Some of you have been subscribed for 2 years, but a lot of you, actually the majority of you, have not, which is crazy, right? That kind of speaks to how many new subscribers and followers there are. And I just want to explain something about this case. So again, you guys know Julian Assange. He's an Australian. He's a journalist. He founded WikiLeaks. And the United States want to put him in jail. They want to put him in prison for 175 years. Yeah, that's 2 centuries, basically, they're threatening him with. And they're doing this, they're charging him under the Espionage Act, so they're basically accusing him of being a spy. They're charging him with 17 counts under the Espionage Act, and 1 count under conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. Okay? Even if they don't get him on all the charges, let's say they get him with 4 or 5 charges, it's like a life sentence anyway, right? Because he's already 50, so let's add 40, 50 years to his, to his bid. Even if it's not 175, even if it's just 50, it's like a life sentence. Now, the judge, originally, she blocked the extradition because of health reasons, because they want to put Assange in these things called special administrative measures. Basically, in the US prison system, these are called SAMs, and it means that you're going to be isolated completely. It's the worst thing imaginable. They have a lot of bad things. This is the worst one. And that's what they want to put Assange in. And I remember, because I was in the court, and I remember the lawyers arguing that, SAMs are not so bad, and there's nothing wrong with them. And then as soon as they lost the case, because Judge Bretzer, she looked at this, and she's like, this guy's going to kill himself if you put him in SAMs. The Americans suddenly changed the tune after they lost. And they said, oh, look, here are these diplomatic assurances. We promise we won't put Assange in SAMs. He can serve his sentence in Australia, in his home country, right? They literally said he can look forward to that. I don't know anyone who looks forward to a jail sentence, but okay. And they said that he can also get medical care and all sorts of nice things. It's a lie. This is a lie. Assange's partner, she said that these assurances, they're not worth the paper they're written on. And I can attest to that because in the High Court, the legal team, Assange's lawyers, they talked about a case, about David Mendoza's case. Mendoza, he was extradited from Spain to the US for drug trafficking, marijuana. And before they extradited him, the Americans told the Spaniards that they promise Mendoza can go back to Spain to serve his sentence. So they just want to try him in the US, and then as soon as he's convicted, they send him back. Well, they lied. They not only gave Mendoza assurances, they gave him something even better. They gave him a written contract. That's a million times better than what Assange is getting. Assange is not even getting a contract, right? Even the assurances, they're garbage. If you read them, and I've gone through this a million times with you, if you read them, the US can back out of the assurances. They've basically given themselves a way out in the text itself. So Assange is not even getting those assurances, right? Proper ones, and he's not even getting a contract. Mendoza got both. He got assurances, he got a contract, and the Americans broke their word, and they refused to send him back to Spain. They kept him there for 6 years. And I published all these documents that, because again, this case was cited by Assange's lawyer, so it's very relevant because they're trying to tell the judges, you can't trust these assurances. The Americans have broken them before. Look at this case. Look at that case. And I published the documents. And I published the contract. Unfortunately, that didn't change their minds. And I'm going to bring Mendoza on in a second to talk about this. But my point is that these assurances are garbage. The Americans gave them after they already lost. But the High Court doesn't care. The High Court looked at this and they said, you know what? We do trust the Americans and we're going to allow the extradition. And so that's where we're at right now. Assange tried to go to the Supreme Court because this is how it works, right? You have the District Court, High Court, Supreme Court. So Assange wins in the lower court. The US appeals to the High Court. Then Assange loses in the High Court and Assange tries to go to the Supreme Court and they tell him no. They told him no. And this is where we're at right now. The case is bounced back to the lower court because Assange has lost. And this rubber stamping we've had this morning is what's happening. They're basically okaying it. Now, again, his lawyers have 4 weeks to counter this. But I think this is scandalous because you cannot be sending a journalist who, again, Assange right now in the UK, so he's not even been extradited. He's already in a maximum security prison. They put him in a place where they usually put terrorists from Al-Qaeda. So I think that already tells you a lot, that they're putting a journalist in a maximum security prison. And the fact that they want to extradite him and the UK is allowing this, I don't think it's very democratic. I don't think it's very good for press freedoms. Again, I'm stating the obvious, but I think it's scandalous. It's very, very bad. And they're doing this because, he published diplomatic cables. He published, evidence of war crimes that the US committed in Iraq, in Afghanistan, torture, you name it. And that's why they're trying to get him. And so they're accusing him of being a spy. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I want to show you a clip from his partner, Stella Morris, or I guess now she should be called Stella Assange since they got married. This is what she had to say outside the court today. Take a look.
Thank you, everyone, for coming here, supporters and the press. You need to keep your eyes on this case. Today was a formality, but I still felt sick to my stomach about what happened today. A magistrate signing an order to send Julian to the United States. The UK has no obligation to extradite Julian Assange to the United States. In fact, it is required by its international obligations to stop this extradition. Boris Johnson and Priti Patel don't extradite Julian to the country that conspired to murder him. Boris Johnson and Priti Patel can stop this at any time. They can stop it today. They can stop this nightmare today and return Julian to his family. They can do the right thing and enforce Article 4 of the US-UK extradition treaty, which prohibits extraditions for political offenses. Right now, they're in breach of their own treaty. This is a political case. And with the signature of the magistrate, this now passes squarely into the political domain. Free Julian Assange.
Right, so she's completely, absolutely correct. If you look at the text in the extradition treaty between the US and the UK, Article 4, here it is, it explicitly prohibits extraditions for political and military offenses. It says extradition shall not be granted if the offense for which extradition is requested is a political offense. Okay? So, obviously, you have a journalist who's published evidence of war crimes, torture. Keep in mind, we're talking about the Iraq war logs, the Afghanistan war diary, the State Department cables. So it's not everything that Assange has published, but they're certainly the most significant. And he's embarrassed the Americans and their allies. He's embarrassed, their war on terror. He's exposed it as being not just a failure, but extremely brutal. You've perhaps seen the collateral murder video. And that's why they're trying to get him. You can't reasonably say that, oh, well, he's a spy. Something funny I always hear is Assange is a traitor. What do you mean he's a traitor? He's an Australian citizen. He's not American. Who is he a traitor to? That doesn't even make sense. Again, he's an Australian citizen in the UK. He's never lived or worked in the United States ever. So I don't know what sort of allegiance he owes to the US. And even then, right, it doesn't make sense, because you're basically saying that there's no freedom of speech for journalists. They should shut up when their government does really brutal things and not publish it. So this is, by definition, it's a political offense. Anyone with half a brain can see what's going on. And so just right off the bat, you should block this extradition, because it's not only ethically wrong, but also legally, under the Extradition Act, you cannot send Assange. And so Stella is absolutely correct. Priti Patel, the Home Secretary in the UK, or Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, they have the power to stop this. They should stop it. They absolutely must. Now, I know they changed the law a little bit in terms of what the Home Secretary can do in 2013, because the year before that, in 2012, there was someone called Gary McKinnon in the UK, and he hacked the Pentagon, he hacked the Navy, the Army, NASA, the biggest computer hack of all time. And they tried to get him in the US as well. And then Theresa May, she was the Home Secretary back then, she blocked the extradition at the last minute. And I think they've taken away that power. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be on human rights grounds, although that should be taken into consideration. Just under the treaty itself, there are grounds to block this extradition of Julian Assange. And a lot of people feel that the fact the British government won't do it, they're playing ball, and this isn't really a trial. A lot of people are calling this a kangaroo court. They're calling this a show trial, right? The UK, the US, they always criticize other countries like Russia and China and Iran and Syria for not having press freedoms. And they're trying to jail a journalist for 2 centuries. 2 centuries. I mean, that you couldn't even make that up, right? But it's true. It's true. And, this is, I've witnessed that myself. Every single court date, I've been there, either in person or virtually. And this is what's happening in the middle of London. And it's certainly a kangaroo trial. It's very dangerous, because if they get him, they'll get anyone. They'll get anyone. I want to show you Jeremy Corbyn, who used to be the leader of the Labour Party. He was also at the court outside Westminster Magistrates, and he spoke today. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
What do you think the decision is going to be today?
I hope the decision today will be that Julian is not extradited to the United States and is freed. But that's up to the court. What I hope is that if it ever ends up on the desk of the Home Secretary, she recognises her huge responsibility to stand up for free speech, journalism and democracy and release Julian Assange. He has done no more than tell the world the truth about military planning, military policies and the horrors of wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I think he deserves to be thanked for his work, released and allowed to continue that work. He's suffered unbelievably in solitary confinement some of the time in a maximum security prison when he is not convicted of anything. It is a disgrace to this country and to freedom of speech all around the world.
Again, very, very important points raised by Corbyn, which I've echoed many times. Keep in mind, Assange right now is in Belmarsh prison. This is a maximum security prison in London. This is where they usually put the worst of the worst. And he's not serving a sentence. Again, this is a journalist in prison. He's not even serving a sentence. And they're threatening him with 2 centuries in prison. How can you look at this and not see that it's political? And, of course, the shocking thing is he had a stroke, right? He had a stroke just a few months ago. So this is in late 2021. And I saw him in the court via the video link. He looked terrible. Today, he looked a bit better. And I'm just trying to explain to you the gravity of the situation, that this is no joke. They're destroying his physical and mental health. Because, the judge, she blocked the extradition based on the fact that he would kill himself if he's extradited, right? Numerous doctors have confirmed this. But it's not just mental, it's also physical. He's had a stroke, and you can see that his health is deteriorating. It's very serious. So, I mean, press freedoms aside, even though we shouldn't say that, it's fundamentally about press freedoms. But you can see the toll this is taking on him personally. right, on his health. I think it's very important to underscore. I want to play you just very quickly a comment from, this is from Kristen Hernapson. He's the editor-in-chief from WikiLeaks. He also spoke outside the court today. Let's take a listen.
16 months ago, this court decided that extraditing Assange would mean a risk to his life, that it will be equal to a death sentence. Now, this court has been ordered to issue that death sentence. That is what happened here today. Now Julian's life is in the hands of Priti Patel and Boris Johnson. They need to do the right thing. You need to make sure they do the right thing. They have the power to stop this, to end this, to save a man's life, and stop this attack on the freedom of the press.
That's what it is. Make no mistake about it. This is an attack on freedom of the press. And I'm seeing this with my own eyes. Let this be put on the record, on the historical record. This is what's happening and has been happening for the past few years. This attempt to extradite him, they're doing it in broad daylight. They're doing it in broad daylight, and they have no shame. They have no shame. These countries that, they claim to be democracies, and they claim to be better than everybody else, and they lecture everybody else, and they want to have the moral high ground. There's no moral high ground in this. This is despicable. This is despicable. And you don't have to like Assange. You can hate Assange. You don't have to like his work, but you cannot deny that this is a threat to press freedoms, and this is very, very, very dangerous. The precedent this sets is it's astronomically bad. Astronomically bad. The fact that this morning a British court ordered the extradition of a journalist to the United States to face up to 2 centuries in prison is revolting. It's unacceptable. Do you understand this? Now, when we were trying to get into the court this morning, they told us it's going to start at 10:15, and we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting. We waited about an hour, and then they finally let us in, but not everybody got in. Mary Kostakidis, she actually did not get in. She was waiting with us for over an hour as well. That's her Twitter over there. She's also one of the journalists, one of the very, very few who've been reporting on this case. She didn't get in. She didn't get in. Isn't that ironic? And she's also Australian, by the way, right? So they won't even let us in to watch them destroy press freedoms. Now, again, it turns out there was a delay in the court. There was another case that was happening, but last time they also didn't let us in until the last moment. And again, I appreciate the court giving us permission to go in. I appreciate their work, but I think it really speaks to the. I really think it speaks volumes about this whole process, right? And of course, when I was in London, they wouldn't let certain journalists in. I had to go in, for example, through the public gallery with other journalists. Like, again, it's you get the feeling, you get the impression they're trying to hide this from the public. And that's why the mainstream media don't report on this. Again, let me be very clear. Don't listen to the mainstream media on this case for 2 reasons. Because they're propagandists and they don't like Assange. They're jealous of his work. They refuse to even call him a journalist, right? They always say the WikiLeaks founder. This guy's done more journalism than all of you combined. And number 2, because they're not even there. I'm in the court. Mary's in the court. Stefano Morizi is in the court, right? Tariq Haddad is in the court. Mohammed Al-Mazi is in the court. Kevin Gostola is in the court. Kathy and Joey from Consortium News are in the court. Sky News, BBC are not in the court. So based on what are they talking about this case? These guys, they come on TV and they start talking, oh, Julian Assange. On what basis are you speaking about this case? You weren't in the court. You don't know anything. It's so ridiculous, right? I told you, man, we're like a handful of journalists, and please go check out everybody I just mentioned. There are more whose names I forgot, so please forgive me. But there are really a great handful of journalists covering this case, and they are the authorities on this matter. They are the ones whose work you should be following and listening to, because they have the right to speak about this. They have the experience and the knowledge and are actually in the court. So this is very important to underscore. And again, I'm so frustrated because I know a lot of you are new here, and I've been covering this for 2 years now, this case. There is literally no way you can look at what's happening to Assange and think, oh, this is okay or legal or moral. It's literally so bad on every single level. The charges are trumped up. The court that he would be in, they basically want him to go face trial in the U.S. in a place in Virginia that's nicknamed the Espionage Court, because the only point of this entire court is to rubber stamp indictments to charge people with. This is the same court, the Eastern District in Virginia, where they charged Snowden, they charged Chelsea Manning, and prosecuted her, right? They unsealed the indictment on Assange, of course. They've gone after Lori Love. Its only purpose is to prosecute journalists and political dissidents, right? It's nicknamed the Espionage Court. The jury is made up of people who work in the CIA or have family and friends in the CIA. Like, it's guaranteed that anyone who comes to this court is going to get convicted. It's a slam dunk. And so the idea that Assange would go there and have a fair trial is lunacy. This is lunacy. You're delusional to say such a thing. And that violates his right to a fair trial, right? This is something that's enshrined. I mean, you have a right to due process in the US. You have the same thing in the UK. Under the European Convention of Human Rights, your right to a fair trial is enshrined. This is a pillar of any legal system, and they're violating that. That's just one thing that I've told you about. There are hundreds of things that I could go through. There are attempts to spy on him. Well, not attempts. They did spy on him in the embassy. They were discussing killing him. Like, how? This is a country that's planned to kill him, and you think they're going to give him a fair trial? Get out of here. So in any case, please, I strongly recommend that you go and look at the reporting of all the other journalists I've just mentioned. And if you want to look at my reporting on this channel, on YouTube, there's an entire playlist. I've put it in order, in chronological order. Everything that happened every single day of the trial, in detail. Everybody who testified, all of it is there. So I have one playlist for the extradition hearing. That was in September, October 2020. And I have one playlist for the High Court, which was just a few months ago in late 2021. So please go check that out and inform yourself about this case. And, there are many, many activists who are participating in the fight for Assange's freedom and the freedom of the press. And, they're really great. They always show up, hundreds of them. They're really dedicated. They do great, fantastic work. Really consider joining them and helping out, because they are very, very dedicated and serious to about all this. So again, I just wanted to give you this update on what's happening with Assange. I think this is shameful. That they are allowing this whole thing to happen. It's great that the judge blocked the extradition on health grounds, but she should have blocked it on all grounds, because it's political, right? And I knew this would happen. As soon as she blocked the extradition, everybody was happy, and rightfully so. But I knew that there's going to come a time where they're going to overturn this, because they've okayed the political charges. The UK is basically saying, yes, this guy is a spy. He's not a journalist. Yeah, he did try to commit computer intrusion. It's really bad. And right now, Assange's team, they have 4 weeks until May 18th to submit an appeal. So we'll see what happens. Whether they can change Priti Patel's mind, I'm doubtful, unfortunately. She recently proposed changes. Her office proposed changes to the UK's Official Secrets Act, where they want to put journalists in prison for 14 years for embarrassing the government. So she doesn't really strike me as the kind of person who cares about Julian Assange, or for press freedoms, for that matter, right? So again, it's nothing personal. I'm just observing her policies, right? If she does hear this, I hope she changes her mind. I hope she does the right thing and she blocks the extradition. She stands up for what the UK claims to be, a democracy. That would be very good, and the right thing to do. And I would credit her infinitely for doing this, because she would deserve that credit if she blocks the extradition. She would very much deserve it. And I hope she does the right thing.